just Onside. Little nervous, and I'll explain why. It's midday. It's a Sunday, which is unusual for a shoot, but OS insisted that we shoot. We've not shot for about 10 days, but I'm very nervous because there's a game going on. Obviously, when you watch this, the game will have been played. Hopefully, Leeds would have won, and I'll be in a really, really good mood. But at this moment, I'm very, very nervous. So, OS, I'm doing it for you. Under no circumstances would I normally record when Leeds are playing, but needs must and all that. How are you, my friend?
I'm very well, thank you, Ayub. It is the ninth fast today, Ayub, so time is swimming along when it comes to Ramadan. We've been trying to get something going for a few days, haven't we? With the 4 hour time difference, and with iftar timings and what have you, it just makes it very challenging. Especially for us, iftar is obviously finish work and then 8 p.m. normally kind of heading to the mosque and what have you. So yeah, it's been a bit difficult. So we're shooting on a weekend, and yeah, you're right. Leeds are playing in a few minutes, right, Ayub? Any early thoughts on the game? An important game, Ayub, with the rest of your rivals winning yesterday, I believe.
I think that's the thing. It's the results that the other teams have had. Now, at one stage, we were about 8 points in front of Burnley. They played in midweek. They played yesterday. Sheffield United played as well, and that was the fear. If they won their games, it was going to be very, very nerve-wracking today now because Sheffield United are level on points, albeit obviously we've got a game in hand. Burnley are 2 points behind us, albeit we've got a game in hand, which is now. So it puts a lot of pressure on today's game. I'm very nervous, but also in one sense, I want to sort of see exactly what this team is made of and what Falk is made of, because it's these challenges that last year we imploded. Towards the end of the season, we just absolutely folded, the players and the manager. And I hope lightning doesn't strike twice. We've just had a little chat offline to see sort of how we're going to do. I wasn't going to follow the game, but you're following the game, so it puts me in an awkward position because obviously I'll be looking at your facial reactions. So I think probably what I'll do as well is every now and then I'll keep on scrolling just to sort of see. To be honest, really, I don't think I can go 45 minutes without checking exactly how things are panning out. So it's going to be an unusual shoot, but let's talk football. Let's talk not quite so well Premier League, and then we'll also talk Champions League. But we'll start off with the Premier League, and really, to be honest, the Premier League champions, Liverpool, have had a fantastic season. Um, is there anything else that can be said about Slot and this Liverpool team? They've been outstanding, worthy winners. Maybe you can question the competition this year, but really, they've been outstanding.
Yeah, it's a difficult one when you speak about the competition, Ayub. Quite often, this has been made out as though because some of their rivals have fallen away this season, Liverpool have had a free run to the Premier League title. And I really do think that's a bit of a disservice to Liverpool. If you remember the season when they won, the COVID season when they won their Premier League title, the first one in 30 years, I believe, there was a lot of talk that ultimately, City weren't quite at the level that they should have been at, and Liverpool ran away with it. But I think if you remember correctly, I think in the first 25 odd games, 26 odd games, they'd won 25 or something along those lines before the COVID break. They were absolutely on fire, probably on record or on track to post a record-breaking points total, actually, prior to the disruption that season. I often find that it's the consistency of the team at the top that has some impact on the others, right? These games are not played kind of mutually exclusive of one another. You just mentioned about Leeds, right? And you're right, Leeds will have been following the results yesterday. You'd be, in a sense, inhuman or bereft of any emotional kind of sentiment not to be at this stage, Ayub. I mean, this is your 36th game of the season, 10 more after now. So this is it. This is the business end. This is when all of that hard work through August through to now March. Now, really, you've got to, kind of bank it and try and seal the deal. So these are critical times. I often find that the team leading, especially Liverpool, given their level of consistency, there is mental pressure that they apply on the others, and that tells. Now, you can't tangibly touch it, but their consistency that season when they won the Premier League title was telling on Man City, the fact that this team will never drop any points. They're winning games after game after game. that puts a certain pressure on your own results. So I think they deserve credit. I don't think it's a case of because the standard hasn't been there, Liverpool have just sauntered to the Premier League title. They've actually led with quite an incredible level of consistency this season. And you saw that yesterday. Again, yes, they were playing the worst team in the Premier League. So even after a shock 1-0 deficit, you felt as though they'll find a way, and they found a way. They did because of the way they play football. They're always looking to create. They always create opportunities. So I think that is a little bit of a misgiving in terms of the standard. I guess for the neutrals, you're right. It looks for the most part, with Wolves picking up a draw yesterday as well, that the bottom three looks, unless Leicester can pull off something. I think they're playing Chelsea away, but it looks like that's settling itself. I think Cunha is about to get a pretty decent ban. I know we're going off topic, but just to give you a bit of an idea for the neutrals, it looks like the bottom three might be settled. I say might, depending on that Cunha ban, which could have serious implications. And the Premier League title's settled. So now in March, you've not got much really to kind of watch over. Liverpool deserve a lot of credit. You're absolutely right. The manager, incredible. If you remember, you a number of actually probably a month or so ago, I was mentioning that they'll want to wrap up the Premier League title quickly because if you remember, we spoke about it. I fancied them to make a deep run in the Champions League, and they're on the cusp of having a route which they will feel comfortable with. Now, you've got to take it game by game. We'll get onto the Champions League shortly, but they've got a huge opportunity in that competition, Ayub. This is a huge opportunity. They've obviously, for me, won the Premier League title. They've got the League Cup final, I think, next weekend against a suddenly injury hit Newcastle with Hall, Botman, and Gordon set to miss the final. Three first team, as you would say, you've gun players as well. So those are critical players. So I think Liverpool are really on the cusp of an incredible season. And just before I pass it over to you, the critical thing for Liverpool right now is with some of the decisions they've got to make, Ayub, in the off season, with trying to seal the deal in some of these competitions right now. This really has the potential for setting them up, not just this year, but hopefully for the coming seasons. And that's what I think Liverpool will take into some of these contract discussions. I think there will be some thought around that there are huge opportunities for Liverpool right now. For me to define, I'm not going to go as far as to say the next decade. I think that's way too long term, especially given the age and the profile of some of the key players within the squad. But they can definitely have a run here, you for the next 2 to 3 years. I mean, if they can hold on to Salah and Van Dijk for another couple of years, there's nothing suggesting that those two players are about to fall off in terms of productivity. Centre backs generally can go on for a little bit longer. There's some question marks about the goalkeeper. Obviously, there's going to be competition next season potentially with the new incoming goalkeeper. Trent Alexander-Arnold, some talk he may leave for Real Madrid. You sense maybe he might be one that jumps ship potentially. But imagine a scenario where they keep all three, keep the goalkeeper, go on to next season. If they do that, they're favourites for next year. I think that goes without saying. But that really gives them that possibility to keep knocking City look a little short, even with the Rodri return. So you're thinking it's there. The Premier League title is there for them to go again, as they say, and really lay down a mark and define an era where you say Liverpool were the best team of that kind of 5 year stretch. Now, we've talked about teams in the past, the Fergie teams, maybe even Wenger, although Arsenal never defended a Premier League title, I believe. But you talk about the Mourinho era and others as well, a few Chelsea titles in between for other managers as well, Conte, Ancelotti. But yeah, incredible opportunity for Liverpool. Yes, this season there's a lot of games being played, a lot of key games being played. Again, we'll come on to Champions League shortly. But I would hope, again, I mentioned that as a Liverpool fan, given the level of business that they may well have to do in the summer, this really should be considered in that particular light, that this isn't just a team for today. This is a team and a play field right now in terms of competition that we can actually go into the next season, next two season maybe, as favourites for the Premier League title. And if they keep playing like they are, they'll be damn close, irrespective of what upturn in form that their perceived rivals will bring in the coming season. So that for me is the exciting element for Liverpool. A young manager still, early in his tenure, hungry, says all the right things. Players also wanting to kind of etch their name whether it's for collective trophies, individual trophies. There's a lot of desire there and kind of determination to win more trophies because they perhaps, but they did come awfully close with some big finals with Klopp as well, and won a Champions League and won a Premier League title. So, yeah, huge opportunity for me. I'm looking. I think the Premier League title is done. Champions League, I think, has to be. I want to say the focus because I always say these are not mutually exclusive. I feel like one's in the bag, but I would think that certain key selection decisions now, Ayub, uh, have to just be considered with a deep Champions League run potentially on the horizon.
I mean, the point you were talking about creating some sort of legacy now. It is really what we wanted to talk about. And you're right, you alluded to uh, various eras where certain teams were dominant. I mean, you had United in the 90s. Uh, there were obviously the challenges from Arsenal, the 2000s, the noughties, that probably will be Chelsea and Mourinho, and then Man City. So this is a really good opportunity, but decisions have to be right. There are, I mean, you talked about the ages of obviously some of the key players, and it is true. I mean, you probably if Salah and Van Dijk stay, there's probably 2 or 3 years that you can get out of them at a good standard, and I think it's absolutely crucial. I mean, I'm never one to advocate that you pay any salary to keep these gun players, but they've got to really try and do everything they can to keep these players. But then what they have to try and do as well is recruit and look to the future because really this is a great opportunity. It's a golden opportunity for Liverpool, as you say, to maybe dominate. I'd probably sort of say for maybe 5 or 6 years if they get it right, if they get the decisions right. And really that's what they should do. I mean, it's a club with enormous history. They've had in the past an epoch where they were the dominant side, and this is a great opportunity. Other teams obviously will strengthen. And you're right about Manchester City. I think there's something quite. It's difficult to put your hand or your finger on exactly what the situation is at Manchester City because again, yesterday another loss, and you can probably turn around and say, well, look, they've written the season off, yes, but still, this is a very un-Manchester City like year. Uh, there's question marks over Guardiola. I don't know whether something is missing. I mean, there was a story recently about his personal life, whether that's had an impact on his coaching. I'm not too sure. Obviously, the Rodri injury has been massive, but there's absolutely no way I'm going to take one player missing, albeit he's the best player in the world. Uh, that should have impacted the season the way that it has. So I'm not sure exactly which way City are going to go. Arsenal, they're always going to be there or thereabouts. At least you'd think that. Chelsea, I'm not sure. I'm disappointed. I really had high expectations. I'm not sure whether this is the right man. So it might be the merry-go-round continues. They might have to get rid of this manager, get the else in. So I'm actually sort of thinking that there's a lot of clubs in flux at this moment in time. They're probably still a year, 2 years away from trying to get it right, which means that they can absolutely stamp their authority. Liverpool, they're riding high on a crest of a wave, and this is the time to not rest on your laurels, to make sure that the recruitment is right. They get players of the right profile. You're talking about Slot as a manager. He is a great manager. He's a great coach. He's hungry. You're absolutely right. And this should be for any Liverpool supporter and Liverpool as a club an opportunity to nail the hammer home and to dominate English football for at least the next 5 years.
Yeah, it's a good point. And look, UB works both ways, isn't it? Not only should the club be doing every whatever they can in terms of efforts to keep this group together as much as possible and replenish in the right areas, but it's one opportunity for the players as well. They'll be looking at the kind of environment right now and the surroundings and be thinking, "Oh, there's an opportunity here. This is not the Man City of old." I mean, there's a possibility that they may not even be in the Champions League next year. Now, five clubs probably will make it from the English domestic league, so you'd still fancy them to get there. But imagine a scenario where Man City are not there in the Champions League next season, or you potentially that gives you another opening next year. Now you might say it's too early, but again, that's maybe another historical rival, not in one of the elite competitions. So you are right. I think from a player perspective, they'll also be looking at it and thinking Salah's looking at going down as the greatest player in Premier League history. He's already got an argument for that, especially if he continues on the form that he's in. Van Dijk will have designs, although he doesn't come across, he's not articulated this, let's say, in as many interviews or press conference. But you'd think he'd like to go down in the pantheon greats of Premier League centre backs. I think he's in that conversation. But again, they're both probably in that conversation of where they probably just want to nail down a few more trophies, be it domestically or on the European stage, for them to have that kind of gravitas within that conversation. So they've both got that to aim for. Trent Alexander-Arnold again could go down as the greatest right back in the history of the league. He'll always have his detractors and what have you, but there's things that he does that I've never seen any fullback do in the history of the history of the Premier League anyway. So yeah, I think there's a lot there for the players as well. The manager's there. There's some talk that they'll be looking to bring in maybe an Isak or somebody up front, although that will take a big sum of money to get him to part ways with Newcastle and vice versa. But you just think again, how will Liverpool look at this in terms of what lens? Will they look at it as though we've won another domestic trophy, we've potentially done a treble because that's on the cards right now? Will they look at that as it and say, well, okay, we're going to keep at a certain level in terms of players over 30 and the contracts and how many years we're giving? Are they going to stick to a very, let's say, rigid approach, or are they going to look at it, which is the way, I guess, from a fan's perspective, you would want to, which is from a sporting perspective, hey, these are big opportunities for us. It's right there for us to be consistently challenging. And I always use those words. That's what big clubs have to be doing in order to be, I guess,
Mm.
considered as successful to some extent. You've got to be at least consistently knocking around in the big competitions at the highest levels, going deep into competitions, be it domestically and on the European stage. Liverpool are doing that this year. They'll again come home with at least, I think, a couple of trophies. Um, the chances are there right now, like I said, to look at next year, the year after. And you could imagine a scenario, you just very quickly, there's some talk about rumors about Saliba to Real Madrid. Yes, there's some talk about Kanate as well. But you could see a scenario where potentially Arsenal, who haven't lost any, what I would say, good players in a couple of years, where you feel as though they could lose, because Arsenal are their nearest challengers just generally, if you
Mm.
look at it
Yeah,
from the club, the status, the manager, and everything. But you could imagine a scenario where if you lose one of those centre backs, Arsenal, to a Real Madrid or what have you, and maybe there's some others as well, again, that really opens it up for Liverpool to have a not clear path, but to be the clear cut favourites for the Premier League title next season as well. And that's what you've got to do when it's like this. You've got to make hay, and you've got to really cash in, as they say. So yeah, time will tell. But that would be hopefully the approach that Liverpool take, which is to really go big, to try and really dominate this particular era or this kind of part of the decade, I would say, domestically and on the European stage.
absolutely. It's an opportunity they can't spurn. I mean, I obviously have a soft spot for Liverpool, and I hope they make the most of this opportunity that they've made themselves. They've obviously created this wonderful season. So let's see how the next seasons pan out. Right, talking about next season, but we'll talk about this season. They had a fortuitous result against PSG. I mean, PSG, if you looked at the stats, they absolutely battered Liverpool. And really, on any other day, it would have been 4-5-1. But it just wasn't meant to be. I mean, that disallowed goal PSG, it sort of almost it told you that perhaps it wasn't going to be their day, and it turned out not to be their night. Uh, but Liverpool just keep marching on. I mean, it's almost as if you're good, you make your own luck, and you have luck because in a sense you've earned that. Uh, let's talk about Liverpool and perhaps talk about the other English clubs. Obviously, your team, magnificent result. I mean, I didn't realise there was a team as weak as PSV in the tournament. To be beaten 7-1, I mean, that's an embarrassment. But well done, the Arsenal. So, what's your thoughts on uh, the Champions League and who do you think potentially has a chance? Because Arsenal probably will be eyeing that up, thinking, well, look, the league's out of our hands. That's not something that we can do. And maybe this is perhaps where we have to put all of our eggs in this basket. Liverpool weren't too impressive. I'm not sure because they've given a lot this season. So I don't know how much is left in the tank Obviously, there's some big games for them to come in the Champions League. I mean, this is if they win this one, they've got Aston Villa probably. But who do you sort of fancy for the Champions League, and where do you put the English clubs in that mix?
Yeah, it's an interesting one just because of the shaping of the draw. You mentioned about Liverpool. Let's just quickly focus on that. Incredible performance from Alisson. I watched that game on Wednesday night, so it was in the early hours for me from 12 a.m. to 2 a.m. So these are challenging Champions League nights over here. But it was well worth it. It was a fantastic game of football. Obviously, you've been to that stadium. It felt like a great atmosphere, Um, and PSG played incredibly well. And if they play similar on Anfield, which is unlikely, but if they play similar, they'll have a great chance because ultimately performances will result more often than not in positive results. And they played really well, dominated the ball, winning lots of their duels. They seemed quicker to everything. They had the extra man in midfield. Liverpool never quite got to terms with that kind of back line and that back three in terms of dominating. And I was kind of texting my brothers at half time that I was expecting Jota or somebody to be sacrificed and Curtis Jones to be brought in just for that extra midfield in the middle of the park because they were just had the extra man all the time. Loads of great opportunities as well. These weren't 50-50 chances. I mean, the chance from, I forgot the player's name, but when Dembele crossed it and he hit it into the ground over the bar, this was a great opportunity. The one on one, which Alisson fantastically saved, and then there's a scramble all over the show. Um, Incredible performance from PSG. And when you don't, again, cash it in, that's going to be a that's going to be a bitter blow. I think they would have stomached a 0-0. But to get beaten at the end through what was a bit of a sucker punch will hurt. You mentioned about Arne Slot. He spoke about how lucky they were. I think he kind of uh, gave the famous Michael Jordan quote about, the harder you work, the luckier that you get. And there is some truth to that to some extent. Liverpool will always, I mean, as poor as they were, and that was about as poor as I've seen them, and I want to give PSG credit. Well, the one huge compliment you pay Liverpool is they're always good for a goal. More often than not, they'll find a way to get a goal. Now they were really poor. Salah had probably one of his worst nights in terms of this season, and he's been playing at an incredible level. But fantastic ball up front. He wins a 50-50, holds it up. Nunes perfectly plays in the substitute and a really smart finish because against a tall goalkeeper, that's where you want to put the ball low and hard. Yeah, look, I think they'll get through because it's Anfield. And I think PSG, so to speak, I'm sure you'll appreciate, kind of emptied the tank. I mean, they threw everything at it, kitchen
Mm,
sink and everything. So I think they kind of emptied what they had, and I just think Liverpool will have enough at home. They'll have enough. They'll dominate the ball. Don't forget, PSG came to the Emirates earlier this season in the group stages. Arsenal won, I think, 2-0 fairly comfortably, if I remember correctly. It really controlled the game. I think that's what Liverpool probably want to do better. I think they want to control the game. If it turns into a game like yesterday against Southampton, I think PSG will take their chances in terms of it being an open game. So I think Liverpool really need to just be more careful and dominating the ball rather than kind of creating a you play, we play type game. Um, in terms of just the general overview, you're right. I mean, Arsenal should be through now to the quarterfinal stage. Incredible result away to PSV. I think, I mean, they're going to play Atletico Madrid or Real Madrid. It's still tight one to call that. You Atletico at home to Real Madrid. Should be an incredible game. There's a part of me that does want Real to win, just simply because they're the big games that you want to play. You, to be honest with you, just in terms of going to the Bernabeu, having Mbappe, Vinicius, Bellingham, and Co coming to the Emirates. It's what the big nights are for, isn't it?
mm,
And if you want to be the best, you've got to beat the best, and that's the way it goes. I think we're headed for if Real get through, I'd still fancy them to come through Arsenal over two legs. And that semi-final potentially of Liverpool against Real Madrid. Yes, Aston Villa will have something to say about that. I think they'll come through Club Brugge, but it's going to be there's going to be a couple. I think we're on course for a couple of big semi-finals. It's there for the English clubs. I think Arsenal are short just because of the injuries. Martinelli, I think, was seen as part of the travelling group to Old Trafford for the game this evening. So I think he's back. He'll be on the bench, obviously, or he might not be part of the squad, but might have just travelled. But Saka's not. I don't think he's quite going to be back for that first leg against Real or Atletico Madrid. So they need both those two because they've not got any strikers as well. So if they can get those two, they can be at least, put a decent team out there, a good functioning team out there. I think right now they're still a bit short. So time will tell. I think for Liverpool, huge opportunity though. If they could come through PSG, which most people would fancy, an English affair against Villa, you'd still fancy them over two legs against a Villa because, I mean, huge opportunity for Villa though, you isn't it? I mean, first time back in the big time. Can you imagine having to play a domestic rival? And let's not forget there is somewhat an Unai Emery effect in terms of competitions in Europe, mostly in the Europa League, but he won't feel out of place, let's say, in terms of big nights in midweek in European competition. So that's one wrinkle to consider. He knows how to set up teams, and they've got enough to hurt you. Big win for them yesterday away to Brentford. So lots to play for. Liverpool, I think, will be the game I'll be tuning in. I think it's on Tuesday night. I'll probably end up watching Real against Atletico the night after and probably skip Arsenal, which is the first time I'd ever do that. But yeah, still lots to play for. Still Barcelona and Bayern are in the other side of the draw. So it's going to be probably a big name final, as it always is. Probably two big semi-finals as well, you would imagine. But all to play for you. But I don't know where you stand, but very much all to play for.
It's getting really exciting. I must confess, I'm not been a fan of this new formula for the Champions League, but really, this is where it really gets the juices flowing. You can't Real Madrid. I mean, it's a team that when you talk about Champions League, Real Madrid is a team that comes to mind, and I think they just have the match winners. I mean, you went through some of their players, and that's perhaps where I think the edge is. That they've just got maybe one or two more match winners than any other club. Liverpool, I mean, they'll count themselves lucky, but again, it's what you said that if you play well, sometimes you'll get luck based on the fact that you've been playing really really well. PSG will rue the missed chances that they had and the dominant to be that dominant to not score. Now, obviously, you can turn around and say we scored, but it was fractionally offside. But it's offside. It may give them some confidence. They've obviously had quite a dominant performance. Uh, I've seen them play a few times now, and they're better when they play on the front foot. So maybe this, perhaps, in a perverse sort of way, is a good result for them. Because if they'd have been winning 2-0, maybe they would have been a little bit more cautious, which is not the way they do. They're not the greatest defending team. So maybe this might just be right. Okay, we're going to just go not quite gung ho, but we're going to be on the front foot. So maybe that perhaps will be their best chance of challenging Liverpool. Now, with Liverpool, I'm just not sure terms of because there's a lot of mile in the legs for a lot of the players. I mean, there has been obviously some rotation, but some of the players have played a lot of minutes, and there's lots of games, lots of intensity. Now, maybe the fact that they've probably the Premier League is done and dusted eases some of that pressure. So maybe, I mean, I was expecting yesterday where some of the big guns would have been rested for the whole game. But obviously, when you go a goal behind, perhaps it puts a different slant on things. Uh, I would still say Real Madrid are probably the favourites. Arsenal, I think, are a damn good side. Damn good side. I think they're a side that if I almost sort of think they're probably even better equipped for European football in some sort of bizarre sort of way. So I think I'm sure Arteta, even with the injuries that the Arsenal have got, I'm sure they'll be thinking that look, there's a distinct possibility that we've got a chance not just to make it to the final, but to win the damn thing. Uh, Liverpool, I just, as I said, I'm just sort of thinking that there's been a couple of laboured performances. Now, I'm not sure whether that's to do with fatigue. Or it's every now and then you just go through a little dip and then you just pick up again. So I would sort of say Real Madrid. I don't think the German team, I mean, in terms of Bayern, decent side, good side, but I just can't see it. I think the winners will be between Real Madrid, Liverpool, and Arsenal.
Yeah, I'd probably widen the net a bit further. It's just difficult to tell, just simply because of the way the draw has shaped up. Like I said, Bayern and Barcelona as part of the other half of the draw. So, a Real Madrid's run to the final, you might well be Man City, Atletico Madrid, Arsenal, Liverpool, Barcelona. I mean, that's a murderous row um, in terms of opponents to play against. I mean, they'll have earned it if they do win it, they'll have definitely earned it. But yeah, look, let's see. I think that game, Atletico Madrid will really still fancy at home. This is typical Simeone, isn't it? He'll feel a goal to overturn at home against Real Madrid, an opponent obviously he knows very well and has gone toe to toe against multiple times. All three teams domestically still fighting for La Liga title, so they're all in the hunt. Great goal by Julian Alvarez. No doubt Man City could do with a little bit of that this season. Um, but that will be a huge game. No doubt, even at this stage, there's absolutely no doubt that even Arsenal, even Liverpool fans will be keeping an eye on that game, especially if Liverpool have obviously come through on Tuesday night. Because Real Madrid in the Champions League is a result you always look out for because of their love affair with this competition. So yeah, I still think Arsenal are short. I'd probably be singing a different tune if they had a Havertz. If they had Havertz, Saka, and Martin, I'd say, well, look, they've got their best team out there. I think you can compete, and if you can compete, then that's an opportunity. Again, I just think for that first leg, they'll be minus Saka and minus their first choice striker, which will really put them behind the eight ball. But anyway, time will tell. You're right. They should get through PSV. And then when you're in the final knockings, a quarter final, and you're playing the big boys, a bit of luck, an injury here or there, a refereeing. There's a lot of things, the variables. You are perhaps right, Arsenal, the way they play in terms of a certain level of caution and what have you. Perhaps Champions League suits them well, but the quarterfinals is when the competition stiffens significantly. So I think your weaknesses become magnified significantly because the margin for error is so tight. Again, for Liverpool, huge opportunity. Let's see if they can make it through PSG and then hopefully an all English affair, which will be an incredible two legs. I think probably very much the story. Villa, can you imagine if Villa get through Club Brugge, which they should at home,
Yeah.
and then play Liverpool? And if you can think, I mean, you wouldn't put it past Villa to knock out Liverpool just because they've beaten Liverpool a few times. Over the previous years and what have you. I mean, Aston Villa in the semi-finals of the Champions League. I mean,
It's
this is
almost as ridiculous as Leeds when we played Valencia in '99.
the good old days. I think you lost 3-0 at home or something. But yeah, I mean, look, it should be great. And let's see. But I think for Liverpool, huge opportunity. And I think you are right. PSG play better on the front foot. I think you're right in terms of they play better when their minds are a bit more clear. Right? Okay, this is what we're gonna have to do. They were very unlucky. I never thought for one moment that that game could end with PSG home and hosed, let's say. Like I never thought that could be the outcome where you felt after the first leg that oh PSG should have too much now or they've got enough of a lead because Anfield is that type of place. But the way they played and the way they created chance after chance after chance, if they had continued in that foray, if they had got the first goal and kept pushing and won, let's say 3-0 or 4-1, which probably was befitting of the performance they put forward, you probably would have thought, well, they've got one foot in the quarterfinal, so it would have been a huge disappointment for Liverpool. But they're in there, they're favourites, they should get through. And then for me, anything goes after that.
Well, okay. That's the Champions League covered. Right. What we'll finish off is
Still,
punditry. There was
still,
a
still nil-nil, you don't worry.
Yeah, yeah. I've been checking whilst you were talking. And we're not playing well according to what I'm reading here. So it's my nerves are even more frayed. Uh, right. We'll talk about punditry. I mean, Jamie Carragher's been in the news recently for a comment he made about the AFCON. He's sort of tried to backtrack or try to explain exactly what he meant. But it's I've never been a huge fan of football punditry and the pundits. I think there's a lot of mediocre pundits out there. There's some good ones, but largely mediocre. I mean, we've talked about this before. I mean, I'm a huge cricket fan, and the level of punditry is a different class altogether. I mean, they're usually much more educated, much more articulate, well spoken, and much more sensible. Uh, but in terms of pundits, it seems to be that they've got to it's clickbait or they've got to make a headline comment, and I understand it. Yes, I mean you're trying to it's entertainment, so therefore you're trying to engage the viewers or provoke the viewers, but there has to be some sort of ability or sense, and I mean with Sky, I mean I'm not a huge fan, but I think everybody else is, of Mika Richards. I think he's a court jester. He's a clown. He doesn't say anything which I think, oh right, that's a revelation. I never thought of that. He's a comedian. I mean, there's every town has probably a geezer like Mika Richards, who just happens to have not been a professional footballer, so therefore he's not going to get an opportunity. I want my pundits to be insightful, to say something that makes me think. Not every time, not every single comment, but at least every now and then come up with something. I mean, they've obviously got an insight, but I just sort of think that the standard is poor, and too many are obsessed with making a comment which makes the news. So, what's your thoughts on football pundits and punditry?
Uh, you phrased the or positioned the question perfectly in terms of some of my thoughts as well. It's interesting. Over the weekend, you sent me the interview that Frank Lampard did with, is it Prutton? Yeah, have I got
Yeah,
that right?
David Prutton. Yeah,
David Prutton, right? Ex Southampton and played for a few clubs, right? I think Norwich as well.
Leeds as well. They play for us. Yeah,
Leeds
Leeds.
as
Yeah, yeah,
well,
yeah.
indeed. And obviously, Frank, I think they won yesterday. They were winning 2-0 at half time. So they are firing
It
forward.
got it became 2-2, and
Oh,
they scored a winner in the 97th minute.
okay, cool.
And Frankie was celebrating big time. That makes it, I think, 8 wins out of nine or 9 wins out of 10.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I was following it here because Richard Keys was speaking about it, and he's a big commentary fan. But you sent me that podcast. I think it's a good 45 minutes, well worth a listen. Sit down interview with Frank Lampard. Always a good listen is Frank. Comes across thoroughly well. Never gives it the big one. Really talks very well, humbly. And he spoke actually, funnily enough, if you remember, you about the piece where he says when Harry Redknapp rings him on the way back
Mm,
from games, and he says because
mm,
he's his uncle, Harry will go through the whole thing and speak to him and say, yeah, and your formation, and then you made that substitution, and then the goal went in as though like Frank wasn't there. Like he's telling him, he's recounting the story, and he says how obviously he has an incredible deference to Uncle Harry as he calls him, and obviously that famous press conference you remember you with the
yeah, yeah.
supporters club at West Ham when Harry Redknapp absolutely stood on his own 2 feet and said, "This boy is going to go right to the very top," and that's why we got rid of a couple of players. I think Matt Holland was one of them when he speaks about a famous clip when he really
Yeah,
and Frankie was just a young lad at the time, but
yeah.
he speaks about how Harry he'll always listen to. Yeah, he's got a few friends at his local boozer who often tell him that he's playing the wrong formation or what have you, and he says, "I don't need to be listening to these blokes." So it's put in a really nice way. It's a really good listen. But
Mm,
you are right. I think it depends on you in terms of what you're looking for as an audience. I think perhaps you and I are of a certain age and desire when it comes to football consumption that we want to be informed about certain things. We want to think in a slightly more kind of third dimension. Don't just tell me what I'm seeing for myself. And I think both of us respectfully, humbly watch a game and trust our eyes to make informed judgments. We may not be as close to things happening behind the scenes, depending on how many articles you read or how much you're on Twitter these days or X. But from a game perspective, I'd like to think we understand the game. We know what works when a team's feeling confident, whatnot, tactically, what's happening, what isn't, how the game's panning out. The only thing I would say is when it comes to football, from what I've observed, Ayub, so we're looking for it from an information perspective, like educate me, inform me, break it down for me, speak to me in an articulate way that I can understand and grasp. And you're right, when it comes to mainstream media, whether it's Sky Sports News, pre-game, post-game, certain shows, the overlap, even perhaps even the CBS show, which in midweek in Champions League, I think for the American audience is a bit more light-hearted entertainment with Mika Richards, Thierry Henry, Carragher, Kate Abdo. But generally speaking, from an information perspective and a breakdown, even at Monday Night Football, I don't. I've stopped actually watching a lot of these simply because I'm not getting what I want out of it. So it's a very subjective thing. That's not doesn't make me a prude or anything. It's just in terms of what I like listening to. Now I'm into obviously a lot of American sports and what have you, and I was watching a big basketball game this morning as well. For me, American sports, especially some of the American coverage, is much more better when it comes to deciphering and sharing information and figure. Now they commit to sports like you wouldn't believe in terms of 24/7 talk shows and all the rest of it. But there's some shows there which I will follow and podcasts that I will listen to religiously, and I mean religiously, from the moment I leave the apartment in the morning. If I'm making my way to the metro on the way to work, that's a good 30 minutes for me door to door in terms of work to office. I will be listening to a sports podcast or something when it comes to basketball or American football or something. Those are stuff where I'm thinking, oh, these are people I like listening to, whether it's Bill Simmons, Nick Wright, whoever they are in American sports. Absolutely well worth listen. I've scoured everything when it comes to football. I'm talking mainstream. Now, you obviously, I'm keen to hear your thoughts. You like to go to that second level when it comes to Leeds fans and Leeds podcast shows and things like this. So I'm happy to hear your thoughts. But I'm talking generally just mainstream in terms of the main channels and the main broadcasters. I genuinely think the punditry and just general commentary around the game and insights and actual analysis is really, really few and far between. Now, they are different games, different sports, and we can speak about cricket, a huge game being played in Dubai right now as we speak in the final. But we've spoken about cricket before. You and I will happily tune in during a lunch break of a test match or something along those lines. We'll put everything to the side. So there's not even action taking place. But if you know it's an audience with Atherton, Hussain, previous times Warne, Holding, Botham. You will happily listen. Botham's a bit more for the kind of crowd and the legend, the aura. But some of these others, even in the good old days when before Rob Key took his big role at England, these are people who I would happily listen to, and they would break down certain things. Graham Smith, Sean Pollock, absolute breakdown the game. I don't know what it is about cricket, a game that we both are big fans of, where you will sit down and listen, and there's some fun moments and there's some light-hearted moments. But even Ricky Ponting, actually, just to name another one, huge. When you listen to them, you're like, I'm happy to sit for 30, 40, 50 minutes and listen to these guys break down the game and insights and stories and all the rest of it. I just find with football, I never get that. I'm just wondering why that is the case. What's your thoughts? I've been looking, and I get a little bit tired just very quickly. I get very tired with some of this quick fire commentary that's just not based in any evidence or based on any kind of analysis. There was recently you talked about Carragher with the AFCON comment. I'm going to cut him some slack. I think it was just poorly phrased and poorly worded. You might argue that there's some underlying sentiment there. I'll let you speak on that. But he made a comment previously about how Arteta was keeping some of the Ethan Nwaneri and Miles Lewis Skelly's feet on the ground by making them change away from the main dressing room or something like that. It's got nothing to do with that. It's to do with safeguarding rules because of their tender age. So it's just there are things that we throw off the cuff, some of these commentators and analysts, where they've not really done any, let's say, kind of research or what have you. So, generally speaking, when it comes to football, I'm quite turned off by the main commentating. I just form my own opinions based off what I'm seeing and what I'm analyzing, and I trust my own instincts when it comes to that. How do you find it with sports? And maybe you can talk about like other sports that you're interested in, where you have been a lot more, let's say, committed to and entertained to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on that on in terms of what we want from pundits and punditry or commentary, and I think I think we're probably the exceptions, not the norm. Football is a working class sport, predominantly, and it has lots of working class supporters, lots of working class protagonists, and albeit they're very wealthy once they're finished, they still perhaps haven't been through maybe the education system that cricketers have. But it's not just that; it's more a case of what interests me always is insights, the mind of a sportsman, because that's something that it's obviously I've never played and I never will play sport at a high level. So therefore, when when somebody has played at the highest level, I'm intrigued to find out what they were thinking or what the thought process is. So apart from the technical stuff, but also it's that ability to try and get in the mind and try and convey what the thought process is and articulate it where you can understand. And I mean, there's a certain snobbery to me. I sort of feel that I'm reasonably educated, reasonably articulate, so therefore I want somebody to convey that message in a manner which I consider consistent with where I consider my educational level. But that's what I'm fascinated by. Cricket offers you that. I mean, when I listen to not just the ex-players such as Hussein Atherton. I mean, some of the broadcasters as well who've not played the game. I mean, there was Christopher Martin Jenkins. He's never played the game, but wonderful, wonderful broadcaster. And he was probably, I mean, I used to love listening to the radio for the reason because Obviously they're describing the play, but it also there's a lot of dead time. Christopher Martin Jenkins was absolutely fantastic at filling the dead time,
Yeah.
and I still remember in 2005 the Ashes, and England had won, and he just presented this on a golden evening at the Oval, and it straight away there was a picture in my mind that the sun was
Mm-hmm.
setting, and that's why I sort of gravitate towards more the commentaries, the commentators and the pundits, because it's a they give an insight into a sport that I want to understand, rather than just it's. I mean, with Mika Richards, I think he's just a comic. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he might have got better, but I refuse. I almost turn off when he comes on because I just view him as some sort of buffoon, some sort of clown. He's never said anything which I've found enlightening, and but again, I'm an exception. I mean, most people would, if they were listening to this podcast, watching this podcast, they'd be insulting me. They're thinking, well, they're entertaining people. If they're entertaining people, obviously, I presume they're doing their job for their respective TV companies.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of the shows around football, I think that's the challenge. A lot of them are centered around just viewers and certain comments, clicks, and all the rest of it. I mean, you can think back to, I remember the famous game when Liverpool played Man United when Roy Keane suggested that Neil Robertson, after he, uh, not Neil Robertson, but left back Liverpool's Robertson,
Andy,
Andy Robertson, I should say Neil Robertson, thinking about the snooker player. But Andy Robertson, if you remember, he had that set two with the linesman. He kept saying he's a baby. Do you remember? It was a famous
yeah.
soundbite that Roy Keane ended up being part of. And he's a bit of a gimmicky type character at the best of times as well. Um, I'm with you. I think a lot of it is, I guess, to find the right forum for ourselves, or at least for myself. Again, it sounds quite snobbish to say, okay, what is the right forum to actually give football commentators? They don't need to have played the game, but somebody who can enlighten, break certain things down. Like I said, I'm happy to hear your thoughts on some of these Leeds podcasts that you listen to and what have you, where they might do break certain things down and insights and analysis and what have you, and podcasts. But the challenge that I've had, like I said, is I've scoured it. I've looked all around, and the challenge I have is a lot of it is partisanship, a lot of contradictions, a lot of hypocrisy. Um, Quite often, the claims that they will make will not be as energetic, let's say, as when they have to sometimes walk some of those things back, and then they'll just do it quietly and what have you. I think you saw something the other day when Jota, I think was it against Wolves, in terms of dived, and Jamie Carragher was like, yeah, definitely will be given, definitely will be given. You could see it was a clear dive, and then when it was walked back, he was. It's just a kind of like a quiet comment afterwards and all the rest of it. So some of the kind of, I want to say the hypocrisy with the contradictions and all the rest of it. And I mean, I was pretty turned off when Roy Keane suggested that Arsenal should have done more with 10 men away to Man City. I mean, I just don't understand it for the life of me. They had something to hold on to and something they hold on to. They nearly did for the best part of 50 minutes. But it's just, I think a lot of it you listen to and you think there's just so many holes in the argument, in the discussion, because 2 weeks earlier they said this about this other football club, and how does this work? On the one hand, it's all about trophies, on the other, it's all about the pro. They're all over the show, quite a lot of them, because they make such outlandish statements. Something that you're seeing perhaps in some of the political spheres right now as well. There's so many outlandish statements going on, and actions that they're having to often walk it back. They're throwing so much at it. There's often so many contradictions. Just you just need to wait a few days, and there'll be a contradiction of some sort. So, yeah, I found football commentary, especially on these shows, in terms of the main forums, the main channels, the main broadcasters, where you should start to see some heavyweight commentary, even if it's the Gary Neville podcast, not just the overlap, but he does one, I think, with a female presenter and Carragher for the American shows as well. I think he's positioning himself for the next World Cup and what have you. But quite often, even when they've got ground and a real time to lay out their arguments, I often find that the commentary is quite basic and nothing really in depth or analytical. Either they'll lean on some of their past experiences, which is great, nothing wrong with that. But in terms of being able to articulate detailed points that make you think, this is what's going on, or taking you behind the curtain, because that's what a lot of these ex-footballers and pundits and commentators have. They have a certain level of access to key personnel. But even radio shows, when it comes to talk sport, I feel like there's so much hunger for clicks and views and sound bites that it's just a game, just to kind of a cesspool sometimes of just trying to get to that point as opposed to a really reasonable debate. And often the worrying thing for me, I'll finish here, is quite often when you then go back into your social circles, and this is again maybe sounds very snobbish. It's why I moved to Dubai away from everyone. I'm only joking. But it's you often find that it's then regurgitated with your social groups as well. They'll say, "Oh, did you hear what Guy Neville said? Yeah, he's got a point." Or did he? And I'm like, often thinking, "No, I don't think he has a point." And these are the 28 reasons why I don't think he's got a point. So yeah, I mean, I found, like I said, football a very difficult listen when it comes to commentary, analysis, punditry, and all the rest of it. Some of the entertaining shows, I take them simply for the entertainment factor. Fine, each to their own. But in terms of breaking down the sport, breaking down what's going on, telling me something, taking me behind the curtain, till date, from now on, I'm pretty much tuned off, and I form my own opinions.
Excellently put. And that was one of the criticisms, I think, when we started this podcast, because we wanted to do it in a certain format, and it wasn't. I mean, there are obviously far more popular football podcasts than ours, but we wanted to remain true to ourselves and do it the way that we wanted to do it. And in a sense, that's maybe the reason, perhaps one of the reasons why we've done it, because we wanted to be true to ourselves. I mean, I just, I don't. I mean, I must confess, I football punditry maybe reflects the masses that it. I suppose. I mean, it's catered for the masses. It's catered for a certain group, and I accept that. I accept that. It doesn't mean that it's something that I subscribe to, but it's just not for me. So certainly, I think. And you talked about Leeds podcasts, and in a sense, they're similar in the sense that obviously they're trying to get more and more viewers. So therefore, how do you get more viewers? You have to try and appeal to the masses. So in a sense, you become a slave to what is popular. And it's very difficult for somebody to say, well, look, I'm not interested in the number of subscribers. I'm not interested in the number of views. I'm going to do it this way. If it has an audience, great. If it doesn't have an audience, well, so be it. So this, the ones that I follow are okay. I mean, what I've done is I've picked and choose because there's lots and lots of Leeds podcasters out there. So I've chosen the ones that at least there's a certain amount of sense to them and a certain amount of intellect to them. So, but if you want lots and lots of views, you've got to be controversial, or you've
Mm.
got to, I suppose, appeal to culture. And maybe they do it in football. They don't do it in cricket. They don't do it in cricket because I mean, they might get the odd commentator perhaps saying something which might be inflammatory, but on the whole, they're Michael Atherton never does it. Nasser Hussain doesn't do it. Martin Nicholas doesn't do it. These are great commentators, pundits who give you an insight into the sport, and as a as a cricketing connoisseur, that's what I want. I want to hear something which makes me think and gives me an understanding. So I think what we're just going to have to do is stick the middle finger up to football commentators and pundits, and get cricket. Just stick to cricket commentators and punditry.
Yeah, just before we, well said, Ayub. Just before we finish, Ayub, I think we're approaching half time. It's still 0-0. I think Piro's missed a great opportunity. I'll let you vent on that in a moment. But quickly,
It's a good job I'm not a pundit because
yeah,
it just would be.
yeah, lots of expletives. Yeah, I mean, what's your thoughts, Ayub? Just very quickly, Arsenal going to Old Trafford today. Still a big game in the historical context of the two rivals. How do you see it panning out at Old Trafford this evening?
I see nothing apart from an Arsenal victory. I just think. I mean, this United side is is there for the taking, and really that's what I want. I want Arsenal to stamp their authority and show that they are the second best team in this league by absolutely thumping Manchester United. Now, whether they've got their eye on sort of the biggest prize, which is Champions League, and maybe they might say, well, look, this is not a game that we need to go gung ho. This is quite an easy game. But I just want them
Easy.
to.
Well,
I mean, it's in Manchester United. This is not the Manchester United of old, so it should be a straightforward victory. But you never know. You never know with Man United and Amarin. He might just pull something out of the bag.
Let's see. Let's see. Are you half time? Are you 0-0? What are your thoughts? Still nervous?
It's an absolute shock. I mean, I've been following this game, and I mean, we never like midday kickoffs, and we've been absolutely shocking
But the
according to
post
this.
mortem has started, I see.
Yeah. And this is again Daniel Fark.
Settle down. The
No,
game's
no,
on.
no, Daniel Fark, because
This podcast is going to be funny when you mention all of this, and by the time the viewers see it, and Leeds have won 4-0 in the second half.
well, I hope so, inshallah. All right, okay, right. And on that note, I'm far too nervous. I think I'm going to have to call it a day. Right. So, thank you so much for tuning in. Offer your thoughts on Liverpool, on punditry as well. What do you think of the pundits? Do you think me and Otis are talking a lot of hot air? Maybe we are, maybe we're not. All right. Until the next time, enjoy yourself. See you soon.